welcome to Planet Poet, Words in Space. I'm your host, Sharon Israel, and it's Poetry Month, National Poetry Month, but here at Planet Poet, it's always Poetry Month, day, hour, and minute. And I'm so happy to welcome poet, essayist, and novelist Sparrow back to the show by phone from Phoenicia, New York, to discuss his new book, Small Happiness and Other Epiphanies. Hi, Sparrow.
Hi there. Hello. Thank you for having me here. Appreciate it very much.
It's a great pleasure. Let me read your bio. Sparrow lives in a double-wide trailer in the salutary hamlet of Phoenicia, New York. He has published 10 books, the most recent being Small Happiness and Other Epiphanies, published by Monkfish Publishing. Sparrow, among many other things, plays the tonette in the axiomatic pop group Foamola. Foamola? Is that correct, Sparrow? Foamola, sorry. And Sparrow is very, very well known nationally and locally. And I'm just going to let you start reading, Sparrow, if you'd like.
Okay, great. Okay, I think I'll start with this essay in my book. It's called Some Secrets of Home Maintenance. Home maintenance. Maintaining your home, you know.
Yeah.
My relationship to home repair is like a Manhattanite's concept of cooking. My main task is to dial the phone. In fact, I am a Manhattanite by birth and grew up in a housing project where all maintenance was speedily accomplished by city employees. One of the numbers I dial is Paraco, our propane company, once a year, to ask for a furnace inspection. A gentle but methodical fellow named Ralph comes, cleans our furnace, and saves us from death by frostbite. Despite my personal inadequacies in home maintenance, I have compiled a list of suggestions for you, precious reader. Number 1, name your house. The English do this, and it's always appealing. Violet and I stayed in a mansion called Columnace in Cheltenham in 1986. 4 American soldiers had been billeted there during World War II, and the house's name was a combination of their states of origin. Here's a suggestion. Title your domicile after your favorite beer. Budweiser Manor or Dos Equis Hall are memorable destinations. And this is number 2. Write an anthem for your house. Here is one based on the Swedish national anthem. So this is an anthem, you know, you can have an anthem for a country, but you can also have one for the house. So I wrote this one for my house based on the Swedish national anthem, and I'm going to sing it. Thou ancient, thou free, thou mountain-encircled home, thou quiet, thou joyful and fair, I greet thee, most beauteous house upon earth, the noble sun rises above thee.
That's lovely, lovely.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, yeah, I just improvised that tune, believe it or not. Sing it every morning when you awaken, just after urinating. And I guess I'll read maybe one more section here, number 10. Don't vacuum. Usually it's unnecessary to sweep or vacuum your house. Just wait for the dust to form dust bunnies or dust mice, lovely phrases, and toss them out the front door. Well, I guess I'll stop there in my, guide to home maintenance.
It's very practical and mystical at the same time, Sparrow. Thank you very much.
Yes, that's my, trademark.
Thank you very much.
I'm reading this book about Thoreau, and, Thoreau was practical and mystical and funny, but nobody realizes it anymore, according to this biography I'm reading.
Yeah, it's like Chekhov. Nobody remembers him for his humor.
That's That's right. I kind of believe, actually, that every great writer is funny. This is something I kind of deeply believe. A good example is Melville. Moby Dick. Each sentence is full of jokes, but, you have to be sensitive to it to hear them.
That has been deconstructed. There's a huge book on Melville deconstruction. I could not even start it. It was so difficult. But we'll always have the doubloon.
What's that?
The doubloon that was nailed up on the Pequod. And that was sort of a symbol. Yeah. I want to ask you about the genesis of the book. And this, you call this as a collection of self-help, self-harm advice. Could you explain?
Yeah. My wife said, I can't use the phrase self-harm because it's actually a phrase. I'm trying to think of the term that's the opposite of self-help. I have a kind of obsession with self-help, and so this is sort of my collected self-help writings over the years. The main reason that it's published is I wrote an essay called Small Happiness that appeared in the Sun magazine. I write for this magazine called The Sun. I've been writing for 40 years. This is my 40th year.
Wow.
This is basically what I've done with my life. I've done my meditation, and I've written for The Sun in Chapel Hill, North Carolina,
and
not some other Sun.
And Chronogram and as you can say, the Woodstock Times, correct? But The Sun is the most...
Yeah, because a lot of these pieces were written for the Woodstock Times. But I wrote this piece called Small Happiness that essentially, my memory is that I wrote it for my daughter when she was about 23, and I wanted to synthesize all the wisdom I'd learned in my life to pass on to her in case I got hit by a truck the next day. And that was Small Happiness, this essay. And Paul Cohen, the guy who publishes Monkfish, he loved this essay, wanted to publish it as a little book, one of those little books that's next to the counter in the bookstore that people steal, I guess it's next to the counter to prevent people from stealing it, but I think people still steal them. So then, we kind of negotiated with over the years to do it, because maybe I published this in 2015. Well, if it's true that my daughter was 23 then, she's 29 now. Anyway, so, and then, finally we agreed we're going to do it. And then what happened? We looked at the essay. It's too small. It's too small even for a small book. So then I thought, well, maybe I'll just gather together a bunch of other essays I've written that will help the human race and put them in a book. And I sent him the manuscript, and he printed the whole thing. He didn't kick out anything, but he Susan Piparato, his ace editor, who's kind of an old friend of mine, she reordered it and made it make some sort of rational, logical sense, which my original editing lacked.
Well, it really flows beautifully, and it's very funny and very inspiring and informative. And it does all those things. So, Sparrow, would you read some more for us?
Oh, yeah, more of it. Well, let me see if what I have in mind here. Well, I think this one, it's funny because I was thinking about the fact that one of my goals was to sort of combine, actual true facts with, utterly ridiculous suggestions. And I think the most successful example of that is this essay called Dance Your Way to Health. Dance Your Way to Health, which even the title sounds like it could be a real article. And it begins kind of real, like this. It begins, believe it or not, science has studied the health benefits of dancing. Dancing improves balance and coordination, muscle strength, flexibility, and increases metabolism. The most immediate improvement I find is to the back. Properly executed, gentle undulation relieves lower back distress. Once you continuously move for 20 minutes, you receive the blessings of aerobic exercise, including cardiovascular enhancement and even better memory. And don't forget mental health. it's hard to be despondent while dancing. A dance doctor examines the patient and prescribes particular movements to improve bodily functioning. Visit a dance doctor today, and here are some further tips. So maybe around here it starts to get a little...
Yeah, I see it shifting into something else right now.
You sort of feel like the ground
You
shifting
do,
under
I do.
And here's one. Use the two radio method. Listen to two radios playing two different stations simultaneously. Now do a complex cha-cha to both stations at once. Do the towel dance. Many daily household activities may be transformed into dances, just as Gene Kelly spins classic movie magnetism by walking with an umbrella in Singin' in the Rain. Try beginning a dance by toweling yourself off after a bath. And while showering, stomp to a 3/4 rhythm, a wet waltz. Most showers are in 3/4. A bath is usually 2/4. Oh, yeah, and this one is an important one here. While you're waiting, dance. Train yourself to treat any delay as a dance invitation. As you stand on line at the supermarket, begin to whirl. After all, music is playing, almost always. With any luck, everyone else standing on line will join you. Then the cashier. Then the store manager.
Oh, I love that. I can just see it happening, too.
I know. It's very visual. There's something, what's the word, particularly visual about the way I write.
And
it seems to me, I've noticed that, if I have fans, I used to have a column in the Chronogram decades ago called A Quarter to Three. And every so often somebody would tell me, I love your column, just love it. And then after a while I started saying to the person, by any chance are you a visual artist? And they would always be a visual artist. Why that is, I can't quite figure, but it may have something to do with the fact that I'm constantly reading comic books.
Well,
also, I'm an art critic, come to think of it, for Chronogram.
Yeah,
They kind of kicked me out of my dopey column and, demoted me to quasi-art critic.
Well,
I call myself actually the most prominent avant-garde art critic of the Hudson Valley.
Well, it's a great extension of being a poet. There were many art critics who were poets. John O'Hara, John Ashbery, Peter Sheldon.
Yeah.
You're just right in there.
I used to read those John Ashbery columns in the New York Magazine, and they were really odd. Eventually published, of course, collected and published.
Yours is quite lovely. It's an essay on the sculptor Andrew Moore. The photographer. Photographer. I'm sorry, and that's in this month's Chronogram. And I always like dance. I always think dancing is a real celebration of being bipedal. It's like.
That's a good point.
I really do. This is Planet Poet Words in Space at WIOX Community Radio. We're live and local from the Catskills. I'm Sharon Israel, your host, and joining me by phone from Phoenicia is a true original poet, essayist, and novelist, Sparrow. Sparrow, could you briefly discuss the book's structure? You sort of started it.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me see. I think I was writing some kind of generic self-help book. Maybe I wrote it for this book. I can't remember. But so there's a bunch of really tiny thoughts that are collected into several different chapters. One called Brief Epiphanies, one called Extended Epiphanies, and then one called Small Happiness, and one called Smaller Happiness. So, and then most of the book was written as strange essays for the supplements to the Woodstock Times. I would say at least half the book. So a friend of mine, Paul Smart, was the editor of these supplements. So, one was on home improvement. I just read you my classic essay on home improvement. Then they'd have an issue on summer pleasures. they tended to be kind of seasonal. And then one on like how to winterize, winter's coming, winterizing your house. So I got these assignments to write these various pieces, and somehow I gradually realized that they really didn't care what I wrote. I could just write any nonsense that came into my head, and they would publish them and pay me $100.
Nice.
So, I wrote them. I'm a sort of hard-working guy. Like, I tend to think, as maybe you can tell already, I think in paragraphs. So I'll be walking around all morning. I don't talk. I'll come up with a line. It may grow into a paragraph, but usually never much more than that. And then I gradually accumulate them. Then I edit them. So then I re-edited them for this book because, now they were actually going to be read by anybody. Because in these supplements to the Woodstock Times, essentially no one reads them as far as I could tell. So, and the Woodstock Times doesn't even exist anymore. It's been replaced by the Hudson Valley One. So, this is a, relic of an era. So, I wrote all these different pieces. They all, I edited them until I kind of liked them, tried to kick out all the crappy parts, the really self-indulgent parts. And then Susan Pipperato knocked them into some order that made sense to her, that I thought would make sense to me, and, that I agreed with. I'm a collaborator at heart. I kind of believe in letting other people rifle through your thoughts and reorient them. The thing I was happiest about was that they commissioned me to do little drawings for this book, and I consider myself really a brilliant artist. So,
did you do the cover of the book? It's quite beautiful.
Yeah, I did the 4 drawings on the cover.
Yeah,
I didn't do the actual.
The
one of them is my wife, actually.
And that's Violet Snow, by the way.
Violet Snow, yeah. I asked her to jump around and dance because they noticed that there was a theme of dancing in the book that recurs, not just the part I read. So they asked me to draw people dancing, so I drew an angel. I drew this guy copied from the internet's, I think, Chubby Checker, actually. Then some hippie woman dancing, and then my wife.
That's lovely. Sparrow, you have some other poems of other poets in the book.
Oh, yeah.
Could you talk about those and maybe read some for us?
Yeah. So I reread this book. In fact, I'm an obsessive contributor to Goodreads. Every book I read, I review on Goodreads, which is some website for literary type people that think they're literary. So I reviewed this for Goodreads. I think I gave it the most number of stars. I forget whether that's 4 or 5, but I gave it a pretty negative review, as I recall. But anyway, I reread the book, and I suddenly noticed, my God, there's really a lot of 19th century poetry in here. Corny, old-fashioned poetry. So I'm going to read a few pieces of it. Let me see. This is a section from, I think, from the first section, Small Happiness, where I'm talking about, how can you be happy in life in a small way? Another small happiness of mine is writing really dumb poems which strike me as funny. Here's one. It's called In My Living Room. A potato chip ruins the symmetry of the carpet. Composing bad poetry helps me appreciate great poetry. The older I get, the more delight I receive reading the masters. Yesterday I was astounded by John Anderson, My Joe. This is by Robert Burns. John Anderson, my Joe, John, when we were first acquaint, your locks were like the raven, your bony brow was brent, but now your brow is belled, John, your locks are like the snaw, but blessings on your frosty pow, John Anderson, my Joe. John Anderson, my Joe, John, we climb the hill together, and mony a canty day, John, we ain't a neither. Now we maun totter down, John, and hand in hand we'll go, and sleep together at the foot, John Anderson, my Joe. Can I read one more? Maybe?
Sure. That's such an emotional poem.
It's funny because I was reading some essay in the American Book Review, is some kind of small potatoes book review that I sometimes write for, and there was a whole issue on erotic poetry, and it said that this poem and a whole bunch of Robert Burns poems, were dirty songs, like really obscene songs that he was commissioned to essentially rewrite and kind of sanitize. And it gave the original, and it was like, the original is like, he can't get it up anymore because he's old, so forget it, John Anderson. And then he sort of crafted it to make it a little more gentle.
Well, he had a very active erotic life, Robert Burns.
Right?
Oh, yes, he was known for that.
He died young, right?
I probably did, but I'm sure you're right. I wonder why. Give us another one.
Oh, okay, yeah. So here in my essay on what is it called? What to buy for summer. Suggestions of purchases. Now is the perfect time to tape a poster to your wall. In winter, a poster looks saturnine and lifeless, but in summer, a poster sparkles. But whose picture should you choose? I suggest a poster featuring a lyric by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And then I give a sample lyric. O summer day beside the joyous sea, O summer day so wonderful and white, so full of gladness and so full of pain, forever and forever shalt thou be, to some the gravestone of a dead delight, to some the landmark of a new domain.
It's really very. It sounds so beautiful, though. It's very lyrical. We were talking about how he was immensely famous during his life, and now he's poo-pooed on.
Yeah, I did look him up today because we were thinking maybe we were going to talk about him. And like the craziest fact I saw about him on Wikipedia, the rapidity with which American readers embraced Longfellow was unparalleled in publishing history in the United States. By 1874, he was earning $3,000 per poem.
Woo!
Yeah. In the last 2 decades of his life, he often received requests for autographs from strangers, which he always sent. John Greenleaf Whittier suggested that it was this massive correspondence which led to Longfellow's death. My friend Longfellow was driven to death by these incessant demands. That's a quote from Whittier. And then, there's some great quotes about how everybody now hates him,
That's too
In the
bad.
20th century literary scholar Kermit Vanderbilt, very nice name, noted, increasingly rare is the scholar who braves ridicule to justify the art of Longfellow's popular rhymings. 20th century poet Louis Putnam Turco concluded that Longfellow was minor and derivative in every way throughout his career, nothing more than a hack imitator of the English romantics.
Ooh.
So it's like a tragic poem in a way, the life of Longfellow, that he's was the biggest poet of his time, and now is kind of an embarrassment.
Sort of a lesson
Probably even more of an embarrassment now that dead white men are really out of
Well, I'm
favor.
sure maybe his name will be reevaluated soon or later, or maybe never.
Yeah, well, not by me, because I don't like them. Although I was reading, this is what I read a lot of these anthologies of these old, particularly American poets, but also English poets, these kind of 19th century poets, And I'm fascinated by them now. I'm very drawn to them now. And I did read a poem somewhere by Longfellow, and I thought it was great. And then I realized, oh, it's by Longfellow, my enemy. and then I thought, well, I have to be, decent about this.
And what is drawing you to them? The rhythms, the sound?
I don't know. It does seem like real poetry. I think a lot of poetry, like most poetry, I mean, I shouldn't say this, but most poetry that's written today is not poetry. It's just prose chopped up into lines. And I'm talking about the stuff in the New Yorker. I mean, I'm talking about the, really famous poets. It just, or it's got some kind of really crappy rhythm, like a kind of, like one of my theories about the New Yorker, each line in the poems is good, but altogether it sucks because there's no rhythm between the lines. There's no sense of the rhythm of speech, in general, and these mostly guys, of course, who were doing this in the 19th century and even earlier, of course. They understood what poetry was. They had this idea of, and maybe they were inspired by the muse, like they said they were.
Well, that's very possible. I think you have your muse too. We'll have to talk about that.
I mean, I do. I have something. I don't know if it's a muse or an anti-muse. I consider myself an anti-poet personally. I'm writing poems with the intention of destroying poetry, not with the intention of creating poetry. And at that, I'm pretty successful. But then, I write, what I like to say about myself, or don't like to say about myself, is I write prosaic poems and poetic prose, which you can kind of hear that, actually, in the stuff I've read already.
You're listening to Planet Poet Words in Space. I'm your host, Sharon Israel, here with poet and anti-poet and prosaic poet and prose poet, philosopher Sparrow, by phone from Phoenicia, New York. And now bringing us the latest in poetic insights is Planet Poet's Poet at Large, Pamela Manché. There is Pamela's theme, joining us by phone from Manhattan. Okay. And Pamela is a Pushcart Prize nominated poet, and she's currently taking workshops with performance artist and writer Karen Finley at the Hudson Valley Writer Center. Hi, Pamela.
Hello, Sharon. Hello, Sparrow.
Hi. Hello.
Hello. How are you? I'm enjoying myself so much, and I was just so delighted when you sang your song at the beginning, Sparrow. You reminded me that my late husband and I had a family song that we used to sing when we drove to Key West with our cats. So that really brought a smile to my lips, and I started to hum the tune. So thank you very much.
And Pamela, I would get that theme right. I have to practice a little bit by getting the fading and entering and fading correctly. So forgive me.
I'm so delighted to have my own theme written by Robert Cucinotta that you can play that over my talking. Yes. You can keep playing it, Sharon. As I'm talking, it's fine.
Pamela, what do you have for us today?
Well, I'm going to talk about the art of collage, and it's in visual art and in writing and in jazz. And what prompted me to put this together for today's show, or to think about this, was I think it was a Saturday, and I spent the morning finishing a collage that I needed for the next day. And I make collages, and I had images from Vogue and from Travel and Leisure, and pieces of tulle and some paint and paper towel, and I put all that together. And then I spent the afternoon at a generative poetry workshop that I love, and we created poems from random word lists and videos, some ancient texts. We looked at some art. And then to relax, that evening I streamed jazz from Smoke Jazz Club, and it was the pianist Sullivan Fortner with his trio. And my ears perked up when he said, at one point, he was talking to us, and he said that he likes to make, he loves to play standards, but he likes to make them new. So, for example, he had taken the sheet music for All the Things You Are, and he tore them up threw them into the air, picked them up, and patched them together, and he wrote a new piece called You Are All Things, which he played, and I was very struck by the feeling that I could feel the original standard in the new version of it, and it was really intriguing, and it was very exciting. And then all of this kind of coalesced in my mind, and I went into my workroom, and I took off the shelf one of my favorite books, which is a collage of myself, which is about Walt Whitman. It's written by Matt Miller and published by the University of Nebraska Press. And I started to think about all these aspects of collage, and having studied collage for many years with the wonderful visual artist and teacher Mariano Del Rosario, the words transformation and repair come up all the time, and they it's just over and over again, transformation and repair. And it was part of all of this. It was part of all these different things that I had seen that day. So one of the things that I was really intrigued by with Whitman, once again, is how he would take lists of it. He had catalogs and newspapers and all sorts of things, but he kept lists of things like body parts, and he wrote them exactly as they were. He wasn't changing them. He was just the tongue or the foot. And then I went through some of his poetry. I wanted to find a good example of that, and what I'm going to read to you is part of number 9 from I Sing the Body Electric. Oh, my body, I dare not desert the likes of you and other men and women, nor the likes of the parts of you. I believe the likes of you are to stand or fall with the likes of the soul, and that they are the soul. I believe the likes of you shall stand or fall with my poems, and that they are my poems. Man's, woman's, child's, youth, wife's, husband's, mother's, father's, young man's, young woman's poems. Head, neck, hair, ears, drop, eyes, eye fringes, iris of the eye, eyebrows, and the waking or sleeping of the lids, mouth, tongue, lips, teeth, roof of the mouth, jaws and the jaw hinges, nose, nostrils of the nose and the partition, cheeks, temples, forehead, chin, throat, back of the neck, etc. And I'm going to stop there. And I just loved how he just chunked it out. He just took these lists and he put these into his poems. And there's a quote in the book which I really love, and I think you two certainly will really like this, and I hope your listeners will too. In one of his prose collections, Specimen Days, Whitman described a creative backstory in which he would, quote, go home, untie the bundle of my notebook fragments, reel out diary scraps and memoranda just as they are, large or small, one after another, into print pages, and let the melanges lacking and wants of connection take care of themselves.
Wow.
And isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, he gave us what he was. He described what he was doing. I mean,
it is, so and he says it's the most wayward, spontaneous, fragmentary book ever printed. And I just found that very exciting.
Fantastic.
And very, very modern. He's doing this long before Dada poets.
That's right.
I mean, he was doing this in 1854, and he was strolling around. He was looking for a new way of doing things, and repeatedly in his notebooks are an Italian word, which I'm probably going to butcher, but I'm going to try and rifacimento, which means to pull together or to remake. Actually, to remake. So he's constantly, a recreation of something is the process of making it exist or to make it exist again in a different form, which is the definition. And it wasn't until 1912 that Picasso and Braque created in visual art. They created a collage, and that word is taken from couleur in French, which means to glue.
Right.
Well, he was so incredible.
I wonder if they wonder if they knew about him.
I don't know. That's a really good question. But it is so modern, and when we look at what we're all doing now, I mean, so many of us are combining. I mean, how many combinations are there of what we're all doing now? Lots and lots and lots, and it's mixed media.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I think in the back of my mind is I kind of distrust these poets that tell you that it's all spontaneous and they don't edit. You know, like you can hear the elegance in that list, the nose, the nostrils of the nose. It's not. It doesn't sound like a science textbook. He's placing these little twists into it that are the mark of a great poet. You know, it seems to me. You know, because Kerouac and Ginsberg, you know, the Beats would say, "Oh yeah, we just write it. You know, first thought, best thought, just comes out of our head." You know, and these guys studied at Columbia with some of the major intellects of the age. You know.
Right, but you can always tell. I mean, I think you can always, with anything, you can tell when there is something behind it. I mean, I think that's what you're saying. There's some knowing behind it. I mean, I know in making collages in visual art, I mean, you are tending to all of the things like composition, and light and dark, and you know, all of that, and bridging borders and connecting, and all of that. So it's not just a random. I mean, that's why it's always a joke when people look at Jackson Pollock and they say, "Oh, anybody could do that," but you can't, because there really is a structure in there. And you're right, Whitman has really he's made real choices, and if you look at it more carefully, you can get an understanding of the choices that he has made. So.
Pamela, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much. Pamela Manché Pearce.
Yes, thank you. It's great.
All right, I'm going to sit back and enjoy the rest of the show.
Thanks so much.
Me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
And
that really thoughtful little discussion she had there.
Pamela she has like little mini lectures that she shares with us, which is great. And right now I'm going to play something from a Woodstock performance reading that you gave. And I'm just going to play it and then we can talk about it.
Okay.
The Bungalow Bop. Hey, it's time for the Bungalow Bop. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Yeah. Hey. Come into my bungalow. Ceiling is very low. You have to lean over and waddle to and fro. Hey! Do the bungalow bop in the kitchen. Do the bungalow bop in the pantry. Do the bungalow bop. Bop, bop, bop. Hey! Hey! All right. Keep your elbows up. Point your toes out. Tilt your knees sideways, as if you have gout. Do the bungalow bop in the kitchen. Do the bungalow bop in the pantry. Bop in the kitchen. Do the bungalow bop. Bop, 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 yeah. Hey! 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 Oh. Do the bungalow bop in the daytime. Do the bungalow bop during playtime. Do the bungalow bop. Bop, 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 yeah! Hey! 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 Take it, Sparrow!
And that was Bungalow Bop, words by Sparrow, music by Robert Burke Warren, with Robert on guitar, Sparrow on tonette, guitar, and laughter. And it's very joyous. It was from my husband was able to extract that from the video, and you can't see it, but that Sparrow was just dancing and bopping, and it was really very infectious. So, Sparrow.
Yeah, and it was written for that essay that I just was reading from, the one about Dance Your Way to Health, where I suggest that everyone start their own dance craze. The way that, when I was a kid in the 60s, there'd be like a new song. Actually, I was just lately obsessing on the song Barefootin'. I don't know if you remember this song, 1966.
Sounds familiar.
And I guess you would call it a soul song. And there was I forget his name, some guy with a generic name like Robert Smith or something. And he did a song that, here's how you dance it. You got to dance it barefoot. So I invented a kind of a Catskills dance craze called the Bungalow Bop, and Robert put it to music, and then I played kind of crazy tonette over it. And my out-of-tune 7-string guitar that my wife bought in Russia in 1971, that I was also playing. I don't know how much you could hear it. It's funny that we really do sound kind of like a acoustic version of the Velvet Underground, kind of.
Well, what is your musical practice, Sparrow?
Well, every day I try to play. What I do is at night, I meditate twice a day. I'm in a group called the Ananda Marga Society. I don't know if I'm shaming them by mentioning them, but so I do this meditation twice a day. The second meditation, I do kirtan, which is a kind of a Sanskrit song that you sing and while you dance. It's a two-step that you dance and sing. The way we do it, anyway, it's a two-step. And I play my guitar and I chant our basic chant, Bhavanam Kevalam, and I kind of make up a new little tune every day. And, that's, and the guitar is completely out of tune. Can't be tuned, I was told. And then, so I try to, but I have carpal tunnel syndrome, so I could only do about 2 minutes a day of playing. So, for a long time I was using some kind of wind instrument until I got this guitar. I'm kind of interested in kind of playing around on the guitar lately. But, before that I've had an ocarina, all these instruments I've lost them all or they've died. I studied the recorder when I was 10. And so when you're studying the recorder, but then the lessons stopped because the teacher was a pedophile. Anyway, I heard that years later. But anyway, this was in Manhattan in my housing project where I grew up, Dykeman houses. And before you can work your way all the way up to a recorder, they give you a tonette, which is like a little plastic,
That's quite nice.
cigar-shaped instrument, a little bit like a recorder. So years later, I was in Foamola, and I discovered my tonette, and I discovered I could play notes on it. Anybody can play on it. You just blow into it, and sounds come out. And, I liked it. I thought it sounded quite good, my tonette, on that song.
It did. It's interesting because it's very collage-y, because Robert is playing chord progressions, standard chord progressions, and then you come in with sort of a deconstructionist stance about what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very influenced by avant-garde jazz in my, performance, maybe in everything I do. You could argue that Ornette Coleman is kind of lurking behind everything that I write. It's not impossible. I mean, I had some kind of epiphany when my wife and I got married in '89, and she had only listened to classical music. I only listened to rock. So then we compromised, and we lived in a tiny apartment in the East Village, so, it was kind of before they invented headphones. So we would play. I was constantly playing music, so I would play mostly jazz as a compromise, and sometimes blues. Someone gave us the complete Robert Johnson cassettes for our wedding, so we listened to them. We listened to cassettes. But, around that time I started listening seriously to Ornette Coleman, and I just listened to it, and it was like, this makes no sense. This is just like, it's like bebop that's out of tune. that's like sort of with not enough notes. And then one day it just dawned on me, it's like it was like learning a language, like learning Portuguese in one moment. It was like, what did he call it? Harmonics, right? He had this whole theory. It was like a philosophy that was also a musical style. And that moment, that epiphany of, speaking of this book which I wrote, which is called, And Other Epiphanies, that real epiphany I had of suddenly understanding Ornette, who knows what effect such a thing has in one's life.
Sure. And you meditate. Do you get ideas for your writing during your meditation?
Well, I mean, that's one reason, I was telling you that I don't talk before 12:01 p.m., so I don't talk all morning. And the reason, basically, that I started doing that, as I recall, is you're supposed to wake up, in my group, you're supposed to wake at 5 in the morning and meditate. And then, so I get up, much later than that because I stay up really late at night. But what is my point? I used to meditate in the morning, and then the whole time I'd be thinking of poems or other thoughts. I'd have all these interesting thoughts, and then I was like tormented. Should I try to remember the thoughts? Well, that's not meditation. That's just writing.
Well,
should I try to not remember the thoughts, but then I'll forget the thoughts?
Exactly. That's a form of meditation for some writing.
Well, I mean, it's not the type of meditation I'm supposed to be doing. I'll put it that way. So I just decided, all right, I'm not going to meditate in the morning. I'm just going to lay in bed and think. I'm going to be Western and contemplative, kind of. I'm thinking, I'm daydreaming, really, which is what you do when you're meditating anyway, at least if you're me. But I'm intentionally daydreaming.
Right, with a notebook by your side.
No, not with a notebook, because I have carpal tunnel syndrome. So I use this method, the ancient Greek memorization method. What was the poem I wrote this morning? Well,
can you explain that briefly?
Yeah, I'll explain it. But I was trying to give an example. But I know what it was. I wrote a poem this morning. It's maybe easier to give a concrete example. I wrote a poem called Party Wisdom. I actually wrote 2 poems called Party Wisdom. These are like wisdom about how to have a party, about partying. I was going to call it partying wisdom, but I didn't like the phrase.
You have advice in the book about parties, too.
Yeah, that's right, about how to give a party.
Right.
Very interesting, weird advice about parties. And, so I wrote this poem this morning, Party Wisdom. Never vomit on a lamp. So I wrote that,
it's very compact.
And then I wanted to remember it, It's good advice. I mean, I don't know if you can get electrocuted from vomiting on a lamp. I just think it's really hard to clean. That's what I was thinking.
You can't put it on your head as easily during a party.
Yeah. Well, if you're really drunk, I suppose it doesn't matter.
But again, that's so visual. I mean, you cannot unsee that now.
Yeah, do you watch these videos? Oh, no, there's videos that are called "You Can't Unhear This." They're like videos about the Beatles. I'm writing this book about how much I hate the Beatles, so I'm like constantly studying the Beatles. And there's some guy who has this "You Can't Unhear This" series of videos. It is true. It is very visual. It looks a little bit like an Archie comic in my mind. So I wake up in the morning, I have to do these hand-washing exercises to help my carpal tunnel syndrome that some healer in Ashland, I think it's called Ashland, New York, gave me these exercises maybe 22 years ago. So I've been doing them every day for 22 years, and maybe they help a little. So first I wash my hands in very cold water, then in very hot water. So I can't immediately run to my computer and write down that brilliant lamp poem. So I just picture a little lamp on my floor. So the ancient Greek method is you think of a room where you know all the furniture, and then you picture an object on one of those pieces of furniture. Let's say a lamp on top of your armchair. And then that'll remind you have to think of the right visual image. It's funny because we're talking about how visual my poems are, and here I remember them with these highly visual cues. So then I remember that all the way till I get to the computer, and then I speak it to my computer. Use a voice-activated computer because of my carpal tunnel syndrome. So I like to say I'm not a writer. I mean, like literally not a writer. I almost never write anything with my hand. I'm a talker. I'm a thinker. I'm like a shaman who, in a ancient tribe or
Right.
current tribe, who just like sits by the fire, stares at the flames, has a vision, and then says it. What I do is oral.
You're
It's not,
right, or an electronic. So you're an electronic shaman.
I have an electronic amanuensis.
Right.
Amanuensis. Amanuensis is a person
Yes.
that writes down your thoughts.
That's beautiful. I love
If you're
that.
Milton, you're blind, you have 3 daughters, but I think only one of them, like a 14-year-old girl, wrote Paradise Lost.
Oh my! What a concept.
Actually wrote it. He said
Sure,
it.
of course.
But there was a book. Was it called Two Lives about Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas? And it said that Gertrude Stein had a version of this. She would write longhand for 1 hour a day. Each time she finished a page, she'd throw it on the floor. When she was done, Alice B. Toklas, her wife, would pick up all the papers and type them up.
Oh, that's sort
But
of like
if Gertrude Stein was writing about how much she liked some pretty girl, Alice B. Toklas would change the name or leave it out.
she had editorial
interfere.
privileges.
Yeah. You're really
That's
reading
great.
Alice B. Toklas. You're not reading
great.
Gertrude Stein.
We are running out. Believe it or not, we're running out of time. Sparrow, you have to come back. We have two
I'll
other
be back,
books you've had 2 other books we need to talk about, more about this one and about your philosophy of living, etc. Would you read something very briefly for us to go out with?
Yeah, sure.
That'd be
I
great.
guess I'll read. I was going to read from my other book, but maybe okay. I'll just read these things.
Anything
these
you
little
want.
brief epiphanies. Okay. Gravity reminds us that the Earth is below, pulling. The Earth needs us. If you don't believe in God, try praying to the New York Times. Oh, New York Times, send me a warm wind this afternoon. I have found this to be extraordinarily effective. Can I read one poem now?
Yes, please.
We have time.
We have about
Okay,
a
this
minute.
is
We have
called-
about a minute.
This is called The Requirements. You don't need poetic talent to write a poem. All you need is courage. I have
true.
time maybe for this one piece here. Don't just celebrate your birthday. Try to intuit the day of your death and celebrate that too.
They're very they're very poignant. I will
Yeah, some
leave,
of them are a little sort of sad.
yeah, I will
almost.
leave the listeners with your poignancy, Sparrow.
Yes, people don't notice enough.
That's
my
right.
poignancy.
That's right. And thank you. I'm so sorry. You have to come back. We'll make it in 2022, and we'll talk about that soon. And I want to thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your beautiful work and wisdom with us. Thank you, Sparrow.
Thank you. It's
Thank you.
really fun, actually.
It was really fun. And thank you, Pamela
Yeah.
Manché Pearce, our poet at large.
That's right.
And tune in
thank her.
2 weeks with an archive show of poet Rosalie Rothman, who says, Sparrow, that she knows you from years ago. You used to write little bits of poetry on paper and send them to her.
Oh, yeah, I know. I seem to know everyone, and I have a terrible memory. But I'm sure I like her very much. I happen to like everyone.
I don't know.
It's one of my flaws.
Well, and your strengths. Thank you so much.
Yes,
And thank
okay,
you
yeah,
so
thank
much
you.
for listening.